Hey guys, welcome to the study of this unit called the City Life or Life in the City. Through this unit we'll be looking at and studying various aspects of the cities in their growth from 1840 to 1890. Real quick, let's take a look at some of the objectives, things you should know by the time you finish this unit. You should be able to talk about the patterns and processes of urbanization in the late 19th century. That, remember, remains urbanization means the growth of cities. The changes in the pattern of immigration in the late 19th century. How did the immigrants move in? We'll be comparing old immigrants to the new immigrants. The new economic and social problems created by the growth of cities or urbanization, and then the relationship of urbanization and immigration combined to the rise of boss rule, or what we know as the political machine. As we talked about in the last unit, the modern city is a product of industrialization. With the growth of industries, technology really just explodes, and that causes the cities to grow because everybody moves to the cities to take advantage of these new jobs and the great and wonderful factories as they are advertised. When they get there, they obviously realize that it's not great and wonderful, but that industrialization causes the growth of cities, which is what this unit is essentially about. First, let's take a look at the old cities. Old cities are small, dirty, crowded, unhealthy, everybody lives close. So here's what it looks like, grand scheme, whole view. Typical view of an old city. Everything, like it says, everything and everyone real close, small, dirty, crowded, unhealthy. The new cities, same thing. The only difference is that it's massive. So in the old city we have small pockets of unhealthiness and crowdedness and dirtiness. In the new city, it's explosive size of dirtiness and crowding, overcrowding, and unhealthiness. The new cities, we consider that to be around the 1850s and on. You can see comparing that other picture to this one. Horse and wagon in the other picture. We have horse and wagon here, but we also have electric streetcars, which I don't know that you can see those in the picture. Old stone buildings and wood buildings compared to brick and mortar skyscrapers here using steel, the new method of making skyscrapers, and the steel I-beams. Obviously explosive growth during this time. A good statistic here: at the beginning of the Civil War, Chicago had a population of 100,000. 10 years before the turn of the century, population of Chicago 1 million. And again, that's because of the factories. The biggest factory in Chicago was the slaughterhouse, the meat industry, due to the cattle farming and the cattle drives coming out of the Midwest. The big hub in Chicago was where the slaughterhouses existed, and once the cattle and other farm animals are slaughtered. 70% of the immigrants coming to the country stay in the cities by the lure of a promise of jobs. They are met by members of the political machine, which we will get to later, and offered assistance through Ellis Island, for example, on the East Coast. And this was one of the many tricks, so to speak, of the political machine. They would send immigrants of all nationalities down to Ellis Island, and they would find groups of immigrants that spoke their language. So imagine yourself getting off a boat, new to the country. You don't speak the language here, but you recognize someone who does, or you recognize the language that they're speaking. You're going to be naturally drawn to them because that's going to be a way for you to maneuver your way through this new city. And so 70% of the immigrants get to the cities, they stay in the cities, and they start working in the factories. As the city grows, it grows into homogeneous zones. Homogeneous meaning similar. It grows into zones of use and zones of income, and obviously grows zones of race and ethnicity. So they live together because of the job they have. They live together because of their income level, and they live together based on their race or ethnicity. Here's where we want to talk about the old immigrants versus the new immigrants. I failed to mention at the top of some points of interest, you'll see objective and then a number. The idea there is that if you refer back to your 4 objectives for this unit, 3 or 4 objectives for this unit, I am trying to give you an idea of where you're going to find that information very specifically in this presentation. Again, back to the homogeneous zones. We see distinct neighborhoods developing. Immigrants tend to stick together. The old immigrants coming into the country from Eastern and Western Europe, they wanted to be completely American when they got here. They wanted to leave behind all their old ways, their old languages, their old customs, their old religion, and adopt all of the American style. They wanted to be American. The new immigrants coming in, and we see this new wave of immigrants around 1850, 1880, 1870, 1880. They are from Southern Europe, Asia, France, China, some Middle Eastern countries. These are the ones who refuse to assimilate. They want to retain some of their old life, their old style. So they keep their language, they keep their customs, they keep their traditions, they keep their religion, and they want to take advantage of the American way of life while keeping their old way of life. And these become the beginnings of hyphenated Americans. This is where we see the people beginning like Asian Americans, Irish Americans, and the like that. These people make it very difficult for native-born Americans, not Native Americans, native-born Americans, white people, to accept them. And so there's a big push called nativism and Americanism to change their thinking here, to force them to become Americanized or to assimilate into the American culture. Now here's what the new city looks like. The center of the city, that's the true heart. That's where everything happens. All your transportation, your political centers, everything is downtown, and mainly because of the lack of transportation, we see that happening. So if anything happens, it happens in the heart of the city, and that's where everybody wants to be, and that's where everybody wants to live, and that's where the rich live for a while. Now, as factories start to get built up, we see the rich moving out. They have the means to do so, and so they don't want to be around all the black smoke and all of the immigrants, and so they begin to move away. They are able to do that again because they have the means, the financial means, and because transportation starts to improve. We start to see the development of electric streetcars and the railways. Subways come later, but it's that type of transportation that allows the rich to move away from the heart of the city and still be able to get to the city in decent time due to the new transportation. Now, one phenomenon that happens when the rich move out of their nice upscale homes, slumlords take over those buildings and divide one room into 4, and that becomes basically a tenement. That's where the new immigrants start to live, and basically it's run down and not taken care of very well. So we start to see slums develop. Here's an example of that. These really tall buildings were at one time, upscale, wealthy residences. It may be an entire floor for one family. But when the rich move out and the buildings are sold to a slum landlord, he would take an individual room, or let's just say an individual floor, and maybe divide that into 8 to 10 living spaces where 8 to 10 families would then rent out to him, and it was not taken care of very well. So these buildings have indoor plumbing, but not to fit 8 to 10 families per floor. The factories again are built in the downtown center, and immigrants like to live close to work. They don't have the means for travel. They don't have the means for a car, and so they're going to live close to work so that they can be guaranteed to get there. And you can see tenement apartments cram over 4,000 people in one city block. Let's go back to that picture real quick. This is an example of a city block, or a portion of a city block. These could be 10, 12 different families worth of laundry hanging up. Obviously overcrowding, but also with the overcrowding we get the waste, solid waste disposal problems. The city was not adapted to handle this large influx of population. The buildings were not designed to host that many people, And so the sewer treatment, the waste facilities was not even closed. I mean, there's other issues as well, but that's the big one, and that leads to a lot of diseases, like cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis. So you have thousands of people. You've got very poor sanitation situations. Everybody's living together. Not only the sanitations, you don't have a way to take a shower or a bath every night, and so just diseases spread everywhere. Again, people have to walk to work. That's why they want to live close to their job. That's number two. Zones of emergence. The city attempts to fix this, but it's not a quick fix. Think of just an example here: Branson, Highway 76, downtown Branson, not the old downtown, the new tourist attraction. When that started, they had the idea of, let's just make this a tourist town, get country music, the old way of life, that kind of thing. They had no idea of the boom that would occur. I mean, if you try to drive down Highway 76 during the summer, it's just insane. You just can't do it. They have not been able to keep up with this influx of tourism. So then back to the cities, they were not able to keep up with this growth as quickly as it happened. So the government does try, but again, we're talking about the laissez-faire government here. If they step in and start to establish rules and zones for the building of tenements or the managing of tenements, that's seen as too much regulation, and the capitalists raise a big fuss about that. So the slumlords really have nothing being held over them that tells them that they have to maintain their residents to a proper standard. As a result of the immigrants living within their groups, and when I say that, I mean places developed like Chinatown and Little Italy, because the Italians gather with what they know. The Chinese live with what they know. You could go forever without speaking English. Sorry about that. The police, there was no political correctness back then. I mean, if there was an issue, they didn't have to worry about speaking Italian or Chinese. If you didn't speak English, then you're going to jail, essentially, if that happened. But there were several suburbs and precincts like this that sometimes the police didn't even go into. But that's just a side note. It's just the idea that these immigrants, the new immigrants, they could speak English if they had to. They just choose not to because they didn't want to totally assimilate into the American culture. The development of suburbs occurs because of the wealthy leaving the heart of the city. It's the same type of situation we see in our suburbs today. Springfield, a long time ago, 1870s, 1850s, the heart of Springfield was Commercial Street, and slowly Springfield continued to grow, and it grew north, basically, it grew south toward Nixa, and the more it grows, the more it is growing southward. That seems to be the main way. We do see some development east and west, but we're just continuing to see the spread of the suburbs, and that's the case in the 1800s, late 1800s. Suburbs developed for these reasons here: low-cost land, the railway transportation. Again, it's become available now, and that allows people to get to the cities. Low-cost construction methods. There's a really good article that I placed on Blackboard about the Sears and Roebuck housing kits. It's mentioned here soon in this presentation. But there's also a side article that I'd like you to read, just out of the History Channel magazine. It's a really interesting thing. Suburbs also developed because of ethnic, racial, and economic class prejudice. To be quite honest, the wealthy, white, industrial types did not want to live with the immigrants. They believed that they were better than the immigrants. Again, referring back to that Anglo-Saxon superiority complex. They didn't want to live with them, so they didn't have to. And then, of course, the American fondness of privacy. We always see the growth of cities. One of the reasons back in the 1840s, 1850s, people left the city because the cities were getting too crowded, so they wanted their space. And by the 1900s, suburbs have developed around every major U.S. city, and we're talking like New York, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago. All these large cities that experience this great boom, this explosion of population. We see suburbs developing around them. Again, because of the wealthy moving out, the homes get better the further you move away from the center, because that's where the money is moving to. This kind of makes sense. Good statistic here on the building of homes. Lower end, meaning the low cost of housing. You can get a nice house for $600. A parlor, we don't really call them parlors anymore. Some people call them sitting rooms. Most of the time today we call these living rooms. So for $600 you can get a living room, kitchen, and 2-bedroom. Not too bad. I mean, today that would be like a studio apartment in New York City for, oh, I don't know, $18,000 maybe a year, or maybe $1,000 a month in New York City today, just for this. On the high end, back in 1886, the high end, that means on the upscale side, anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400. That'll get you 2 stories, indoor bath, fireplaces, and 3 bedrooms. Indoor bath. Notice in the $600 home, there's no bathroom. You get to use the outhouse for $600. So these wealthy types, they move out and they build their own homes. Sears and Roebuck gets into this business, and that's referred to that just a moment ago. They start selling home kits. Think of a chest of drawers, or think of your entertainment center that your TV sits on. That probably came from a box, and if you're like me, it probably came from Walmart. All the pieces slide out, and you have a nice little set of instructions where A connects to B and C connects to D, and sometimes you have pieces left over. That's the idea of these Sears and Roebuck's houses. You would order a house, whatever style you wanted, whatever price range you could fit, and over a period of weeks, pieces of this house would be sent to you. Now, you wouldn't get everything all at once. Obviously, you wouldn't want it sitting out in the elements. But the pieces would arrive on a regular basis based on a timeline of how they think the house should be built. And you could literally have your house built in about 90 days from this kit. It's just insane. Think of a miniature dollhouse, but it's a family-sized house. It's crazy. Most people would build their houses right along the streetcar line, again, for easy access to the downtown city areas where they worked. Good picture here. I got this online from the archives from, I think, Springfield. I know it says Springfield, but I'm looking here at the stamp across. I'm pretty sure this is just a picture of a street where the streetcar would run, and over here on your right side, this is it looks like a new development taking place, probably a house being built. We see the development of the middle class during the industrial age. When the industrial boom takes place, there is no middle class. You have your wealthy, you have your labor class. At the turn of the century, after 1900, we do start to see the development of a middle class, and that's because of some changes that take place in government under the leadership of Teddy Roosevelt. When he becomes president in 1904, he actually does enforce a lot of legislation, the Sherman Antitrust Act, and does push for regulation of businesses, and then we see some gains for the workers. So that's where the middle class begins. They start to take advantage of these gains. 25% of the population now has live-in help, basically a maid, and then most people, or not most, a few more have at least enough money to go shopping in department stores. The edge of the town, again, starts to get overrun as the city grows. It expands, and then the wealthy want to move away for their privacy and for all the reasons we listed above. So we see this urban sprawl taking place. This is a good representation of urban sprawl. So not that this is the downtown of a city, but let's just say, for example, this used to be the old downtown, and here's all your factory buildings. Well, all of this is urban sprawl. You know, maybe the suburbs was just on the very edge, and then 10 years later it's here, and then 10 years later it's here. And you can see how it developed around this main line here. This obviously is a modern day photo of some city, but you get the idea of urban sprawl is what I'm trying to show you there. As in the industrial era when we see this big boom, transportation, the railroads have a major significance to play in that. And the same thing here with the cities growing the way they have. Transportation plays a large role in that. The big thing is the electric streetcar and the elevated railroad. In Chicago, it's called the L train. And I think, yep, we have a photo here. This is the elevated railroad in Chicago called the L train, or elevated. Good example of a horse-drawn trolley. San Francisco is known for its electric trolleys. What's the caption say? Never mind. There's a caption down below, but I can't see it. Let's see. There we go. The elevated railway in 9th Avenue. All right. Finally, into the political machine. This is, again, as you see here, Objective 3 and Objective 4. With the growth of the cities and with the influx of immigrants coming to the cities, the development of the political machine is aided by those two aspects. Political machine is a distinctive American institution, begins around 1840s, remains powerful through the 1930s. It began around the 1840s because it's about that time where the political parties really start to get divided. In the last semester, I think we talked about the Federalists and the Democrats and the Republicans. And right around that time, shortly following Andrew Jackson, we start to see the Federalists fade away and the two major parties, the Democrats and Republicans, emerging. And it's with that emergence that the political machines really come into play. The whole purpose, the main job of a political machine is to keep the political party in power. Republicans and Democrats alike each have them. Essentially, it's a shadow government. It runs behind the scenes. The boss, which we'll talk about that in a moment, the boss of the political machine is not an elected official. He's probably not involved in any major political decisions, but he runs the machine. It's his job to make sure his party stays in power. And the two biggest ones were in Chicago and in New York City, but every major city has one. And it's arguable that major cities still have them today. Now, these machines developed because expansion of the franchise in the 1840s, again, the creation of two strong political parties, the Democrats and Republicans. That's what I'm referring to there when I say franchise. That's the Democrats and Republicans. Cities and local government are overwhelmed. They cannot possibly keep up with the growth of the cities and all the immigrants coming in. They have too much to handle, so the last thing on their mind is a group of men trying to control the politics of the city. And of course, the entrepreneurs, the capitalists, they get involved. They like the idea of making profit, and if they already have government on their side because government is not regulating anything, now if they can get politics on their side where they can get some laws passed, they can see some laws that might benefit their business, like let's just say tax breaks, for example. That seems to be something that's in the news today. If they can get that on their side or get a couple senators in their pocket, they're pretty sure that they're going to get a few more profits coming their way. The machine operates, we'll show you how it operates here in a second, but it offers a lot of services in exchange for votes. Early in the presentation, I mentioned imagine yourself being an immigrant. You're off the boat, you don't speak a language, and all of a sudden here comes this gentleman in a nice suit, and he speaks your language, and he's offering to help you. He's going to help you go through the immigration process. He's going to get your papers. You get your papers, you're now in the big city. Well, what do you do? Well, here, come with me. I'll show you a place to live. And he gets you a nice room for your family. Well, now what do? I don't have a job. Well, come with me. I have a man who likes to hire you. He likes to hire the Italians. Let's just say we're Italian. He likes to hire Italians. So this guy not only has helped you as soon as you got on shore, he has helped you through the immigration services. He's helped you find a place to live, and he's helped you find a job, and you and all your family. So all he is asking in return is, when it comes time for election, maybe you remember my boss's name, or maybe you remember that I'm working for the Democrats. And what are you going to do as an Italian? Okay, fine, I'll vote for you. Look what you did for me. Sure, I'll vote for you. Take a little time out here. Currently in Congress, with all the immigration laws being talked about today, currently in Congress. That's the big argument of Republicans to Democrats. The only reason they want to give the Republicans claim, the only reason Democrats want to give amnesty to illegal immigrants already in the country is because they know that those illegal immigrants, once legalized, will vote for Democrats. And, think about that for a second. Why would they not? Who allowed them in the country? Democrats. Who allowed them to become citizens? Democrats. Why would they not vote Democrat? So it's kind of a legitimate argument. Now, whether the Democrats are doing it for that purpose, who's to say? I mean, that's a political argument. We can get into that at another point in time, but same idea, same situation. The city government, again, is being controlled by this machine, and essentially no one's monitoring them. Like I said, the powers that be, the police, they have their hands full with the growth of cities and immigrants, so the machine is left to manage itself and essentially license this deal. They control government, so they can do whatever they basically want to. And the example of that would be Boss Tweed in New York City. New York City needed a new courthouse. The political machine controlled the city. If you wanted to work in New York City, you had to buy a business license. The only way you could buy a business license is go through the courthouse. Well, who controlled the courthouse? The political machine. So essentially, if you wanted a business license, you had to agree to all these political machines, and you had to pledge loyalty or allegiance to the political party that's in power. If you were a Republican and the Democrats were in power, you weren't getting a business license. So all in all, New York City needs a new courthouse. New courthouse gets built, but the city pays insanely like 10 times more than what it was worth. It should have cost around, $15,000-$20,000 to build the courthouse back then. But you can see here, it should have cost between $250,000 to $350,000 back then. But by the time it's all done, the taxpayers of New York City ended up paying $12 million to $13 million for this courthouse. So where did all that extra money go? Well, it went to the pockets of the political bosses. It went to a few politicians that were paid to look the other way. It went to the construction people, basically just padding the pockets of everyone in the political machine. Here's a good picture of the city courthouse, the $12 million courthouse. Okay, the organization, it's a very well-run, organized business. We're going to show you real quick. It starts out with tenement captains. A tenement is a building. It's where immigrants live. So one captain would be in charge of one building, and it would be his job to make sure the people in that building got what they need, especially around election time. When they got about 2 to 3 weeks away from the election, these people became very vocal. They became very public in helping the immigrants with what they need. At the next level, we see block captains. A block would be like a city block, so maybe 5 or 6 tenement buildings. Again, 2 to 3 weeks out, this block captain made sure that everybody on that block got a little bit of what they need. The tenement captains report to the block captains. At the next level is a precinct. A precinct is usually determined over it's a space of land or a space in the city, an area of city in which you vote. Nixa has several precincts. We don't call them that. We call them voting districts today. But essentially, that's what it was. If you live in this area of the city, that's your precinct, and that's where you vote. So block captains report to the precinct captains. A ward is an area that's made up of several precincts, and again, precinct captains report to ward captains. And then finally, here's the guy at the top, the city boss. This is a picture of Boss Tweed, William Tweed, one of the most famous political bosses of this era. He is the one responsible for robbing the city of New York City of all that money when they built the courthouse. And incidentally, it's him. He is actually taken down by a cartoonist, Thomas Nast, who would draw all these cartoons and pictures about how much he's stealing and how he's controlling everything. So there's what it looks like, just one big giant pyramid scheme. Again, everything's held together by favors and loyalty. You help me, I'll help you. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That type of activity. Lots of theft, lots of patronage, lots of negativity that takes place in the political machine. But on the positive side, they actually did do good things for the immigrants. They're one of the few groups to actually have the financial means to help immigrants. Now granted, they were not helping the immigrants because they wanted to help provide a service to the community. They were helping because they knew they would get votes in return. But they still helped. One of the few groups to do that. They were able to provide employment, medical, any kind of recreation or assistance, and they dealt with people on equal terms. But again, they had no interest in finding the causes and cures for poverty. In fact, poverty was keeping the political machine in power, because these immigrants would live 48 to 50 weeks out of the year in abject poverty, but for 2 to 3 weeks they would get everything that they needed, and that would be the 2 to 3 weeks leading up to the election. In the long run, just made things worse. Again, the example of the building of the courthouse, that's $12 to $13 million from the taxpayers. Those are the people who have to pay for that. So that's going to cause all kinds of costs to increase. Obviously, corruption and scandals take place throughout the cities where political machines are prevalent. They do ignore a lot of regulations when building large buildings and such. Excuse me on that one. Again, they're only in it for themselves, but yeah, they just make things worse. And by the 1930s, we see the ending of the political machine again, because of the administration really cracks down on that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt wanted to maintain power, and he didn't need all these little political machines battling against him. So he was sure to knock all that out so that all the power rested in the federal government. And that's why we see a lot of people, or hear a lot of people who are against and dislike FDR in his term, because he took so much power into his own hands during his presidency. Killed off, I'm not sure if it's killed off. You can argue that it exists today. It doesn't exist at the same level as it did in the 1840s and 1880s. Like William Tweed, we don't have a political machine like that, but we still have a shadow government behind the Republicans and behind the Democrats running the show. So that's the end of this vodcast. This YouTube video, I've gone ahead and stopped it. I will place the link to this video on Blackboard. If we were to try to watch it here in the Prezi, you would not be able to hear it. So I will place the link of this YouTube video in the regular content, and I would like you to watch that before you progress, before you answer the questions from these online notes. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
In the antebellum